We're live?
I
We're,
don't
we're,
see anything on the
it
No,
says
we
we're
are.
live.
So we are on YouTube. Yeah. We're
are
Hmm.
they're
we?
up and now.
Right.
Yep.
Shocking. Well, okay, then we're doing this, right?
Let's do it.
Is that confirmation that we're doing this?
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
Okay.
Hi, everybody.
So yeah, for the benefit of people who are listening on the Non-Zero podcast or the Psychopolitica podcast, like a day or two hence, let me set the stage a little. This is a live feed, which makes me a little nervous, but I think I can handle the pressure. It's a live stream on YouTube. And I think it's going to be very unlike the average conversation that's held on this planet. It's one of the few things about it that I can say for sure. I can also say that we are kind of inaugurating a show that Boris and Nikita, who are with me here, are going to do. So, Nikita Petrov, may be familiar to non-zero readers. He was with us for a while there on non-zero. And Boris, whose last name Boris will be the first person to pronounce, because I'm not going to try. Boris, what is your last name?
Shoshitaishvili.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I just wasn't quite sure. And both Boris and Nikita were born in Russia and no longer live there. And so, as for the conversation, first of all, I think the late great Michael Brooks, who did a lot of live streaming, used to always tell people to smash the like button on the assumption that feeds the YouTube algorithm and brings in millions. I don't know if it's true, but I don't discourage it. So, okay, so as to what we're up to here, there is this metaphor you may have heard: flying the airplane while you're building it. That's what this show is. Actually, this show today is taxiing while you're starting to build the airplane, taxiing on the runway. And then Boris and Nikita are going to start flying the thing while building it, which is to say that it's a somewhat open ended project. But I think we have some idea of what it's going to be like. And I'm about to give each of you the opportunity to summarize, like, if you're forced to say in a single sentence what you two are up to, go ahead. What I'd say before that is, uh, it's about, well, you can correct me as we go on. This will be a whole discussion, but I think it's partly about how weird the times we live in are and kind of the different vectors from which you can address that in a way. Like I was thinking, as we were preparing for this, I think of this show as being kind of cosmic in perspective, philosophical. I mean, I've heard you two talk about it.
Mhm.
And then this week in the run up, it's like Trump does these tariffs and it's like an earthquake. And I'm thinking, God, who wants to listen to cosmic stuff when you've got this very concrete issue shaking the world? But then I thought, but this is so typical. This is what the show is about. It's like the current moment is just so weird that like an earthquake like this happens and people go, well, yeah, it's another earthquake. I mean,
That's
it's like
right.
I was talking to somebody the other day and they said, I can't believe Trump and AI are happening at the same time. And that's a good point. There's just all kinds of stuff
Mhm.
happening at the same time. Now I will turn, and I'm going to speak less and less as this, don't worry, folks, as this goes on. But Nikita, if you were forced to summarize in one sentence, how long would the sentence be?
So I'll try one sentence, and then if you allow me, I will expand on it.
Hell yeah, that's cheating, man. This
Okay,
is
one
like,
sentence. One sentence with a preamble. So
you have to
I
at least
think
pause before the elaboration, okay?
so. I'll do my version. I think my idea is it's going to be different for different people, including the participants. But here's my version. This show is about meeting, quote unquote, my people dispersed throughout the world and living through history with them.
That was good, but you're
Yeah.
right. I mean, that was successful because now I want elaboration. Like, who are your people? Who are these people
Well,
you speak of?
that is the point. So, I mean, to me, the easiest way to describe what we're up to here is chronological, just like how it happened. And for me, it happened through it started with conversations I started having one-on-one with my subscribers at Psychopolitica. And the point there originally was, let me figure out who my audience is. Like, I know there are people who are reading my stuff. Sometimes I get an email, but I, don't see them face to face. I don't know who these people are really. And then I had a few of those conversations, and it turned out to be, I still don't know who these people are because they're so different, and they're from all over the world, and they're of different ages and gender and occupation and outlook on the world, nationalities. But there is a sense of kinship that I felt in all of these conversations, or almost all of these conversations. And I started doing that, when I was in Armenia, just out of Russia, when the war in Ukraine started. And then I kept doing it with some regularity throughout, like until now. And that whole time, to me, still is the weirdest, transitory period where both the world is changing in many different ways, and my life in it, my life trajectory is just, I still have no idea where I'm going. I left Russia, spent time in Armenia, now I'm in Spain. It's been a year. I still don't really understand what's happening around me in Spain because it's a foreign culture. And I'm, trying to learn what is going on, but it's a surreal experience. And as I talk to people, it turns out that everybody feels there's a lot of surreal shit happening, and they have different perspectives. Their individual experiences are different, but it's very nice to be able to come together and just kind of live through this not alone and hear other people's perspectives and share the time as the world maybe burning or maybe turn into something new. But at least we're going through this together.
Okay. Boris, what's your one sentence? Are you going to cheat too?
Yeah,
But
of course.
I think you deserve to cheat after that. After that
No.
filibuster, man. I would retaliate.
Nikita set the stage for the elaboration. So the one sentence would be that we're aiming to activate the Psychopolitica community, the non-zero community, look for intersections between them, and create a kind of a platform of free play with the ideas that are emerging, both in the published content, but also just what people are thinking as they're reading the two newsletters, as they're watching interviews. So that's the one sentence. The elaboration for me would be that I came into this actually kind of as a member of both communities. I was a graduate student, and I started watching Meaning of Life and Blogging Heads TV just about 10 years ago, almost exactly. And then I think I discovered Nikita maybe in that orbit, but also I had read Julian Jaynes's The Origin of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind. And I was looking for professors and scholars, Daniel Dennett being one example, who took that theory seriously, or at least wanted to give it, a proper hearing. And I encountered an interview that Nikita had done with Tanya Luhrmann, a professor at Stanford. Like this was, I don't think I've ever told you this, Nikita, or just
No.
Yeah. So this was also almost 10 years ago. So having myself benefited from the two communities, and while I was continuing on this kind of academic path, I was writing about Homeric epic, but then starting to think, like, what do scientists mean when they talk about evolution as a kind of an epic and a grounding narrative? And and then Bob is writing. You wrote non-zero, which in some ways can kind of fit into this. So I was playing with these giant ideas, or like maybe I was more specifically focused academically on a narrow idea, and then it was expanding out into these kind of questions of not just classical Greece, but the sciences. And over time, I ended up in this kind of space of thinking about planetary thought, thinking about planetary identity. And that's, the reason I give that backstory is that that's one more place that I think is really promising for both Psychopolitica and non-zero to have kind of put forward this question of, like even in the title of Earthling, what does it mean to be an Earthling? And this is stuff that I think about academically, but I'm excited to kind of enter into conversations with people as they think and as they approach the question of collective identity, of participation in ways. And the communities already, in many ways are doing this, I think. So that's the elaboration.
Yeah. And let me elaborate a little. So when you said, Boris, that this, in a way involves the content from both Non-Zero and Psychopolitica. I mean, first of all, like that covers a lot of ground because I'm not sure the intersection of in the Venn diagram. I don't know how big the intersection between those two is, or if I think there is kind of one uh well, not of sensibility. There actually is some philosophical overlap that might not be apparent, that is more in subtext or something. And I want to talk about that. But I was, when I was partly surprised just to hear you talk about the content in Non-Zero, because a good half of Non-Zero is very concrete, current eventsy, and so on, even though we try to put that in a light that it's not often put in. And Boris, I met you in the context of the Noosphere, which is this idea you've devoted a lot of time to thinking about. I've written about. It's the idea of a giant kind of, global mind is one take on it. There are two people primarily associated with it: Pierre Teilhard de Chardin and a Russian, Vernadsky, who had a somewhat different conception. But anyway, what I want to say is that seems like a super cosmic thing, and yet even it has very concrete material manifestations. It's been built via just technology, just plain old technologies we're familiar with. So I do, yeah. There's this kind of interface between the concrete and the cosmic that I suspect you two will be visiting repeatedly. Let me just, before I yield the stage again, let me mention that I listened. You two did kind of a dress rehearsal for this that's on the Psychopolitica feed and podcast feed. Which for the time being, I think if you want to be sure and get that, you should go to the Psychopolitica newsletter and get the RSS code and stick it into your podcast app. But and there were a few things that came out. First of all, I thought the chemistry was very good between you two, and in some kind of surprising ways. I mean, there was synergy between Boris, your grounding in classical studies, your knowledge of the Greek world and ancient philosophy and stuff, and Nikita's interests. There were things like your Russianness paid off in weird ways, like the comparison between Luigi Mangione, that's his name, right? The guy who killed the insurance executive, and Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment. And as for cosmic stuff, I mean, you talked about the simulation, and you grounded that in some ancient idea. You compared that to some ancient ideas, the simulation hypothesis, and raised a very good question of like, why is the simulation suddenly a thing? Why are people taking it more seriously? I mean, I actually talk about that a little in the introduction to the book I'm writing on AI. I do think it's like kind of a significant thing. And then the last thing I'd say in terms of things you guys talked about, although you talked about a lot, was you brought up this phrase tribeless tribe, which I've been trying to do something with for some time. I still have the Twitter handle at Tribeless Tribe. You have to be careful to pronounce it. It's tribeless, not tribalist. And I was kind of for a while thinking it could be an organizing principle for a group of people. It's probably not all that well suited to that because, for one thing, everybody does have a tribe, and nobody really wants to let go of all their tribes. They want to be at least a fan of some sports team, and they may be religious, or they may identify strongly with their nation. So I don't think your audience is going to be the tribeless tribe. At the same time, I think one thing the three of us share is a somewhat critical stance toward tribal identity. I think we would probably all say we should at least interrogate our tribal identities, right? Like, because there's a lot of toxic forms of tribalism. So I think a certain skepticism, I personally, of all the I won't go beyond that. I won't get into my feelings about nationalism right now. But so I think I think identity in the weird time we live in is a whole thing, and how it can be a constructive thing and how it can be a destructive thing, I would say. So I have said enough for a while, I think. And
we should also mention that we're going to talk amongst ourselves for the first hour, but starting with the second, people will be able to ask a question or say a thing or share an idea via Zoom. And the link to the Zoom meeting is in the video description on YouTube.
We should also say you two are going to do one of these. Flying solo is not the term because there'll be two of you, but you'll still be building the plane and flying it. And that is going to be on Monday, the 14th at 1 p.m. Eastern time, another live stream
That
will
correct.
then subsequently show up in both the Non-Zero podcast feed and the Psychopolitica feed.
That is correct. Yeah.
And where will people go to get the link to that? You can always go to Psychopolitica. I think that's a place where you can most count on there being some kind of prominent place. So that's Psychopolitica, Politica with a C.
.substack.com.
Yeah. Okay, take it away.
Yeah, where do we take this away? So on the Tribeless tribe thing, this is one of the also ideas for what this show is to me, is instead of trying to, like, you start with a name, this is the idea behind the community, and then let's try to build it. I think Boris and I both think, well, there are these communities already. There is the Psychopolitica. Maybe community is too strong a word. An audience is more what they are factually, like what they have in common is they receive this newsletter. But in my talking to people one-on-one, I felt there's some commonality there. And I've done one stream by myself, I think, and one with Boris. And I really, again, felt a kind of warmth of a community. And then there is the non-zero community. And a lot of people that I talked to from the Psychopolitica world found out about Psychopolitica through non-zero, through me doing an interview and me at Meaning of Life, or you and I talking, Bob. And so the idea for me is, let's just meet each other to begin with. Let's find out who is already connected through these, in the noosphere, through these things we put out, text, images, and videos, and say where you are and who you are and what life has been like lately. And then from that, we'll see if an image emerges. And maybe that will be the Tribeless tribe, or maybe not. So again, the link to the Zoom is in the video description on YouTube, and we'll open it up
for people who have actual, who want to, in the second half of this, in second hour, we're going to take questions, and that's the way to get in line. Let me quickly add, Nikita, that you have ideas. You're like I think, in my view, a true artist. I mean, you have actual artistic skills. But also you have, I think, the sensibility of an artist. And I've always thought you had a rare combination, actually. What's that? I'm about to compliment you. Don't interrupt me. What? What'd you say?
I think it's more sensibility than the skill.
Well, you have good artistic taste.
Thank you.
And but you do have the sensibility of an artist. You do have skill. I think you do have genuine skill. But also your rare combination of like aesthetic sensitivity and, I would say, analytical capability. And I've always said that about you. Anyway, you have ideas that I guess you'll eventually get to about how some visual things you do might play a role in this show, in the development of this community. And in isolating kind of ideas that are of significance. I don't want to say too much, but I would also say I know you two are very intent on the interactivity of it. The community aspect of it. One reason you can't say too much about what this is going to become is because it will depend partly on the input from people who are participating.
That's right. Yeah. So on the idea, the artist dimension of this, I don't think we should spend too much time on this, and it's one of the things that we'll keep doing this regularly, and things will emerge. And so there's a lot of thought that we are putting into it behind the scenes, but to spend the entire hour talking about the premise of what we think we might be doing would maybe be counterproductive. But the notion is, as ideas come up in these conversations, we're going to be developing. There's this format that I came up with called idea cards, and it's just a way to put. There's going to be a visual representation and a little text description of an idea that came up, and then we'll keep developing them iteratively, and so the image will improve over time, and the formulation of the idea is going to be articulated better and better over time. And there are various playful dynamics that we think might emerge from this thing. But we're doing a lot of like introductory talks, talking about talking. Bob, I want to ask you a question. So in the announcement of this conversation, we said in this conversation so far, we already mentioned a few times, it's a peculiar moment in time. When people say that, and it's a commonplace sentiment, people say weird shit is happening, but they mean different things about it when they say it. There is like, I would say starting with COVID, it became very common that people are saying, I don't know what's happening in life is just really weird lately. But some people trace it a little earlier than that. But there is like, whatever happened during the COVID time, there are these wars that, for me, this was a huge change of my entire world because it just affected my particular position in life and my relationship to my identity and all of that stuff. But there's also AI, there's Trump 1 and Trump 2. There are Trump-like characters emerging in other countries. A lot of them have strange hair. There's, psychedelics are coming back into the mainstream. Before we started talking about AI, social media was the thing that people would talk like, this is wild. Things are, we're changing our whole relationship to reality. We're spending all our time staring at these phones. Teenage self-harm is on the rise, and some people trace it to the effects of social media. There are people, Brian Johnson, you wrote about him in Non-Zero fairly recently, who says
the immortality guy?
Yeah. His thing is like, we are probably the last few generations that even need to die. There's a lot of weird shit, is my point. UFOs are being talked about in Congress. But what do you, when you say the world has gotten weird, we're living through something strange, which dimensions are the most kind of important or that you relate to most strongly of the ones I mentioned or some that I didn't mention?
Well, I guess I'd say call attention to two things that are related. One is the accelerating pace of technological change, which over the last few years has crossed a kind of threshold into like serious AI. And the other, in my book Non-Zero, I trace the whole history of, life, but also humankind to higher and higher levels of organization, social organization. And I for the last couple of decades, I would have said, for the last few decades, the big story is the tension between kind of the nation state as the fundamental political unit and the forces pushing us toward greater international coordination, the forces that make it in the actual interest of nations and people to do a certain amount of coordinating, solving problems like climate change, pandemics, and I would say now handling AI and so on. Like even Trump is a reaction to that tension between the nation state, Trump's constituency feels that they were hurt by the process of globalization, and some of them were in economic terms. So I see a lot of the weirdness and tumult as a product of one of those two things. And of course, the one thing, the technology, is what's driving the globalization. So, I see it as kind of one thing. And as I said, Boris and I have both long had an interest in this idea of the noosphere, the idea that where humanity is headed is towards some kind of global, in principle, some kind of global mind. I mean, that's in a way the positive scenario, because I think the alternatives to some degree of global coordination are pretty much all bad. I think I see them as being almost inherently chaotic. But I have only recently, well, since I started writing the book, started to take seriously the idea that the noosphere, that there's some question as to what the neurons in the noosphere are going to be. Are they going to be humans, or are they going to be AIs, or what? Whereas, of course, Teilhard de Chardin did not envision AI, although he was a technological visionary. He saw where this was all heading, but AI didn't play a big. So I don't know if those are the big things I would isolate. I mean, the tariffs are a perfect example of like its attention, well, between nationalist and internationalist impulses. And it's a result of the impact of globalization on different groups of people within nations.
Yeah. Let me riff on the noosphere bit, Bob. If you, that one thing that comes to mind is that, the noosphere, right, conveys also a sense, not just that there's a kind of a global neural network, even though it can mean that. It also, at least, like, if you put emphasis on that noos or nous part of the word, it conveys that there's like a sense of reason and understanding, or even kind of consciousness.
Which the word is, nous is Greek for mind, right?
Exactly. Yeah, nous is Greek for mind, and like the kind of mind that it puts emphasis on kind of comprehension, understanding, kind of reason, rather than just kind of pure cognitive ability, you could say.
Okay.
So what's interesting for me about the moment is that, the noosphere proposed, in the 20s and then elaborated in the 50s and all of that, has to some extent, like, it's still a very important concept, but there are now kind of two other concepts of the infosphere and the technosphere that people who are thinking in this kind of planetary mode are proposing. And when you just think about the concepts and what they represent, the infosphere is emphasizing maybe a little bit closer to that neural network that you mentioned. It's emphasizing the sheer, pace and extent of informational, interaction, of informational, pooling that we have that then can be kind of translated into, let's say now with AI. And then the technosphere, people who write about that are emphasizing kind of the sheer weight and complexity of the physical dense stuff that humans create. There's actually like a pretty interesting study that at best estimates, the technosphere has probably become heavier than the biosphere at this point. So like biomass is actually at this point, on Earth, not as substantial as technology,
which is amazing, because there's a lot of biomass.
There's a lot of biomass, yeah. But what's interesting is, like, there's then this question this is now connecting back to what you were saying, Bob, about, like, do we see the noosphere forming? What do we think in the, in coming decades? Is that in a certain sense, we've had a lot of development in the infosphere and in the technosphere. But like, what I would emphasize is that all of the connotations of nous or noos, in a certain sense, that's where we're kind of lagging behind. And that's where we could, start thinking about the governance question, start thinking about developing cognitive empathy as actually a noospherical, as something kind of necessary for a more noospherical world would be the ability to take perspective well, like take the perspective of others well in making those decisions. And so it's, it's a kind of a splitting of like what is actually happening planetarily. That's
so.
Yeah.
So can you elaborate a little on the connotations of so it's NOOS, Greek for mind, and you're saying it should be taken to connote understanding. I mean, would you go so far as to say wisdom, or that's too much of
Yeah.
a reach?
I think that's fairly appropriate. I mean, it's not Sophia, so I have to kind of think
Right.
kind of carefully
Reason
about,
or
but
wisdom?
these are but you know,
I said what Nikita's asking what I said. I said wisdom, and he said kind of basically, although there's a Greek term, Sophia, more famously associated with that,
yeah.
the
But
goddess
I
of
think you're
wisdom.
right. That I mean, this would have to get maybe this is at some point Nikita and I can have a kind of a proper ancient Greek a special ancient Greek philosophy on specifically on this. But you know, the nous. I mean, I think like from from what I remember, you know, Aristotle described it as actually kind of the one of the identities of the prime mover and like the kind of ultimate kind of God of the universe. And then this
He
makes
was talking about Noos, Noos.
yeah, or nous. Sometimes it's contracted into NOS or NOUS. Just to,
I just want to interject another ancient Greek word, which is logos, because I think it could become relevant to what you're. I have my idea. Well, you know, that is the idea of a logic that is unfolding through history, reason. In the New Testament, in the book of John, it's always translated as is in the beginning was the Word. But the original Greek text says in the beginning was the logos. That's logos is being translated as word, but logos meant a lot more than word when it was put in that text. It was a conception of divine logic and divine purpose. And I think whether you want to call it divine or not, I personally see the unfolding of technology with all its manifestations and implications for humans as having the kind of order and direction, ultimately, as chaotic as it is in the short run, that you associate with the term logos. And I've written about this. I think you could make the case that it has some of the attributes of divinity, at least in the sense of having a kind of moral direction in a certain sense. But anyway, I would say logos is a word I encourage you to put on the shelf for further inspection. And then I didn't realize that Aristotle had he just kind of
I think it was one of the ways he described the prime mover. That well, that's the kind of the
as
highest level,
nous.
the highest level, like that self-thinking thought. That highest level is what nous does. Interestingly,
That's interesting.
the only common word we have in English and that I can think of that derives from nous is actually paranoia. I think that's
Really
Interesting.
like when you're thinking to, which would be an interesting kind of place for connecting, you know, this
well. There
non-zero
is
nous side to the
there's
psychopathetic
the
side.
obscure term noetic, which brings us to psychedelics, if you want to go there, because William James defined a mystical experience as noetic, Noetic, but ineffable, meaning you feel, well, Nikita, this brings us to DMT, but you feel that some kind of knowledge has been imparted. It brings us to other things like, James experimented with nitrous oxide, which is a classic case of like, it gives you the conviction that there's something profound you're onto, but then you can't articulate it. And as the stuff fades away, it's like, oh man, what happened to that? I'm sure there was an idea there that I was sure was true. But anyway, the point is Noetic, I assume is that noetic imparting knowledge, that must be related to the Greek.
Totally.
Nous, right?
Totally. Yeah. So noetic, noema, like these more, more specialized terms. And one thing to throw in here, actually, I think that's helpful for the logos distinction. And then Nikita, I'm sure you'll have a lot to say about this other dimension that Bob's bringing up, is that noetic but ineffable in a way captures one of the differences between nous and logos, because logos is actually something, a logic that you can usually explain or convey or justify, or that you can kind of see and express. And nous, I think, does have more room for, what are the experiences that are deeply mindful, you could say, and full of understanding and potentially opening out to wisdom. But I don't think it makes as strong of an emphasis on whether those are, ones you can verbally describe and share, through careful description, or not. So it opens up that, I think that's why, James might have been going for noetic in that moment. But
Okay.
stop there.
last time we talked, Boris, we spent some time drawing parallels between Gnosticism, which you could say formulate differently, a certain school of thought within early Christianity, and the simulation theory, which most of the time I hear about it, it's presented as a new idea. Like now that we have this technology, you can extrapolate. We're so good at creating these simulations. Computers are getting even better. Soon enough, we'll be able to create a simulation that is indistinguishable from reality. And that's why it makes sense to think about the proposition that we might be living in a simulation. And so it's like the only reason that we're having this conversation is the technology that we now have. But this 2000 years old school of thought postulates that this world is some kind of a fake, fraudulent reality created by an entity who considers himself God, but is just unaware of the actual situation. He was a creation that never was supposed to happen. So we live in a fraudulent reality, a simulated reality, created not by the prime mover God, but by some entity that doesn't know its own nature, which I can easily see as AI or a computer programmer, maybe a computer programmer. So there are these parallels. And we talked about that last time we talked. And now as Bob was saying things about logos and finding translations for it, in the Bible, in the default translation, it's the word, but there are different ways to say it. Isn't code the current kind of parlay, like in modern lingo would be the term? This is the code behind reality. The fabric of this world comes out from this something
I
linguistic.
personally would say that I think of algorithm as being a little closer to the logos than code. It's a logic that is motivating. So it's the realization of the code. It's the mobilization. You write the code and then you let it loose and you've got an algorithm.
Nice. So yeah, almost in the beginning was the algorithm. Oh, sorry, Bob. I didn't mean to cut you off.
When you guys talk about the noosphere as the mind, the global mind, do you imagine like ChatGPT that's ruling the world, or what do you imagine? Like, what is who is this entity? Is that just an algorithm that
it doesn't have to have a centralized? I mean, I think this is the great question of our time. It's like, well, first of all, are we going to manage to not dissolve into chaos? In other words, will there be some degree of global coordination? And in some sense, a noosphere, even, I mean, leave aside like Teilhard de Chardin's specific ideas about the theological significance of it, and leave aside the metaphysical questions, which are good, as to whether the noosphere could have a unified consciousness, whether it could be like something to be the noosphere, as Thomas Nagel, phrased the question of consciousness. If you're going to have coordination, there's going to be some degree of communication there will be a web of communication around the world. And the question is like, how centralized or diffuse will it be? How centralized will power be? And some pretty smart people think a good question is going to be how much of the power will be in flesh and blood and how much will be in silicon, right? They think there's a question there.
Totally.
I mean, the noosphere, I mean, first of all, there's a big difference between Teilhard's noosphere and Vernadsky's noosphere.
Right. That's true as well, yeah. Vernadsky,
I think maybe, Boris, you're the one who told me that Vernadsky included, the technosphere, right?
Exactly.
He included all the manifestations of human creativity.
Totally. Yeah, no, go ahead, Bob, sorry.
Yeah, that's all I would say. I mean, I think the question is open-ended as to like, what do we mean by noosphere? I think only within the last few years, you got to start asking, well, do we mean to include AI? Like, could AI be nodes, neurons in the noosphere? Could there be a single AI running the whole thing? Or could there be a super intelligent AI wielding dictator running the whole thing, or what?
Or multiple ones. This is
Yeah,
one of
or
the we're talking about the the global brain, the even before AI, the internet. People would talk about this web of information that is encompassing the entire world. And I remember when the internet was young and I was a child, it did feel like this is transnational. There are no borders. This world is without borders. You just go to any website and there are no rules.
yep.
And now it's very, very different. And I see that being like the changes happen in real time. With Russia, when the war started, this was one of the first like examples of the war started. Putin immediately bans Twitter, Facebook, other websites like that, which makes sense. You want to control information. This is an authoritative government. You block these channels off. You want to have a tighter control on the information online. And then in just a little bit, Netflix leaves Russia, and Netflix becomes unavailable in Russia because Putin is evil and we should not do business in Russia. So the other side is doing the exact same thing. The wall behind the two segments of the internet is being built from both sides. And then as time went on, more and more of the barrier becomes stronger, and the changes to the rules within these segments of the internet become more pronounced, and people are building their own AIs, right? There's the American ones, there's Russians are trying to do their thing, not really, making a lot of news, but China is. And so you can imagine powerful AIs that could become either the kind of national brain or some layer within that national brain, but no giant global brain. It could be a few different brains that are not that talk to each other like different humans talk to one another, but who are not melded together.
Yeah, what makes me think of is that there's a sort of a question, one of the kind of centralization versus diffuse structure, whatever global mind may emerge. But now with AI, there's also the question of to what degree that mind operates algorithmically or to what degree it operates through whatever kind of modes of understanding and consciousness that we might try to isolate about the human mind, in contrast to the progress in AI. And then there's also the question of whether those two completely blur into each other. Are developments in LLMs, et cetera, really kind of turning AIs into noetic entities, you could say, or are they turning them into infospheric algorithmic entities? And so like one way, and then, and all of this intersects then with geopolitics in the way that I think, Nikita, kind of you're bringing out of like, what are then the divides that get built? So there's like, I feel like AI has brought up a second set of questions for the noosphere, because the first set's already there. Like that's there from like early interpreters of, Teilhard thinking like, well, if everything's a global mind, what about my individual mind? What about, the kind of city consciousness or national identity or national consciousness? So those questions were already there of centralization versus kind of diffuse networking. But now there's the question of like, what is the character of thought? And this is actually something that a media theorist, Alexander Wilson, he said that right now the infosphere is rising over the noosphere like an algorithmic leviathan. So he was very much, at least in the way he was writing, and this was like maybe 7-8 years ago that he published this paper.
Who said this?
I think he's a media theorist. His name's Alexander Wilson, and he was one of the few people who has written like a kind of a long and thoughtful treatment of specifically the relationship between the infosphere and the noosphere. And this was like pre a lot of, AI stuff. And so that,
Can you
that phrase,
articulate that phrase in like expand on this? What does this mean?
yeah, the
Infosphere
algorithmic leviathan.
rising.
So, he was, of course, alluding to Hobbes, right? And Hobbes's Thomas Hobbes's vision, right, of the state as a leviathan to whom you give over decision-making power and power of violence in exchange for security and in exchange for stability. But he was trying to say that in where we've moved with the relationship between our cognition and our technology and our informational technology is to offload more and more onto more algorithmic modes. So you could say, first of all, like, we of course kind of offload a lot of our own, cognitive load now onto our devices. But you could also maybe even turn this around and say that then that comes back and potentially we get trained almost like behaviorist training at moments with our social media, with our phones, etc. And so that has opened up. I think this isn't something that is talked about as much among theorists of the noosphere. It's starting to be, but I think it's a really interesting kind of push that you're making, Nikita, by saying like what is the center of thought in a potentially conscious world, so to speak, and two, what is the character of that thought in that kind of world? And then Bob, you alluded to the Thomas Nagel, and what does it feel like to be a world? To adapt.
Well, and what is the degree of freedom that the individual human beings have? And Teilhard was very aware of that question. Before I say anything else, I should say in a few minutes we're going to turn to questions, and for people who want to ask them, there's a link below the YouTube video where we're live streaming that leads you to the Zoom room where you would show up and ask the question. Also, if anybody wants to smash a like button, feel free. Also, again, a reminder that on Monday, the 14th, Nikita and Boris, you said at 1 p.m. Eastern time, same time as now?
That's right.
We'll be doing a live stream and continuing the conversation, and it will again be a participatory event. Yeah, the question of freedom is, another. You had said, Nikita, originally the internet, it was thought of as this almost inherently global thing. It was going to break down the walls.
Hmm.
It was also thought of as this inherently liberating thing at the individual level, and that turned out to be wrong. Nobody imagined that some of the kind of surveillance software and some of the AI that permits, people thought, well, how are you going to police this realm of discourse? You're going to hire a billion people? And no, it turns out you just have to invent AI and you're done. And so the potential for tremendous constraints on freedom are there. Teilhard was aware of that challenge even without imagining AI because, for one thing, it was the era of the Soviet Union. There was, and he didn't like that model and so on. But so what are you thinking? In about 10 minutes or what? When do you guys think we should turn to looks like we have a fair number of
maybe in 10 minutes we can.
So what else
I wanted to throw one more thing in. I listened to your conversation, Bob, with who was it? You were talking, you and your guest both were trying to make sense or formulate what people mean when they say that panpsychism inevitably leads to pantheism. And
now that could have been Paul Bloom.
I think you probably brought it up with Paul, but it started out in a conversation with.
Could have been a very old comment. I mean, pantheism. Oh, Ross Douthat. It's probably Ross Douthat who just wrote a book called Believe. I had him on the show. The New York Times columnist.
That's right. That's right.
A guy I've known for a long time. Yeah.
So the reason I'm bringing this. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
The reason I'm bringing this up is now, as you were talking about, like all of these questions that are being posed about what the noosphere like might become, right? Where the center is, how much freedom do individual people have? How much power does this thing have? Is it like something to be it? I think at a certain level, all of these questions have always been there about our current situation. Like, we know that it's something like to be us individually, how do you know whether it is something like to be the planet or not? How do you know whether it is something like
Well,
to
or to
be
be
a
Boeing,
city?
or to like know how to make an airliner, right? Like, is a
Right.
corporation is a very integrated information processing system, and it knows how to do things that no one person knows how to do.
Exactly.
And it gets
Exactly.
good news and it gets bad news and it reacts to good news and bad news. Who knows? I
Exactly.
don't rule out the possibility that social information processing systems are capable of sentience. Who knows?
Well, and also, Nikita, to where you're going with panpsychism and pantheism, there's also this question of the noosphere is distinctly planetary, right? It's about, I mean, even the sphere part is coming out of like
Mm-hmm.
biosphere, the lithosphere, the hydrosphere. It's talking about our planet. So in principle, we could imagine, different noospheres on different planets if we, encountered extraterrestrial life, or if we ended up developing civilizations on other planets, they could kind of grow up differently. So there is like an interesting relationship with pantheism and panpsychism because it doesn't have that locational specificity, but it has, I
Right.
think, something really similar. So it's almost like we're now facing panpsychism on a planetary, the question of panpsychism on a planetary scale or with a planetary specificity. And there's this kind of interesting question of, between the cosmic, something I'm at least personally really interested. What's the relationship between the cosmic vision, let's say panpsychism, pantheism, and the planetary vision, like let's say specifically the noosphere? Like what happens when the planet becomes this sort of organizing entity for us to kind of think at large scales, but unlike the cosmos, we directly impact the planet. Our technologies are all over it. We're involved
Mm-hmm.
with its processes. With the cosmos, we study it and we send, some of us out, as far as we can. I think the farthest any human being has ever gone is around the other side of the moon, like in a spacecraft being kind of launched back. But like the cosmos still for now. So in a certain way, if you wanted to build up, like Bob brought up the corporation and what does it feel like to be Boeing? Maybe down the line will be what does it feel like to be a solar system? What does it feel like to be but in a certain sense, that question isn't pressing in the way that the planetary question is becoming pressing.
Although
Because
I would kind of attack. I mean, first of all, again, Teilhard de Chardin was something like a panpsychist. He did think there was like a conscious underside of some degree to all physical matter. But I would say, on the issue of a solar system having a consciousness, for it being like much to be a solar system, I mean, remember, with human consciousness at least, and this could be a metaphysically general thing, predictable things we are not very conscious of. It's like when you're first learning to drive to work, you're conscious of every
Mm-hmm.
moment. And then before long, you're like, wait, I don't remember driving to work. You were thinking about different stuff the whole time because your conscious mind, once you've mastered a routine, once there's regularity, consciousness seems to not be needed in the same way, at least to judge by our own experience.
That almost opens up the question for Nikita too, of like, what is the noosphere's unconscious? I mean, there's the version of the unconscious that you're talking about, Bob, of we offload things that are regular habits and our neural processes take care of them without our constant attention. And then there's like, obviously the Freudian and Jungian visions of the unconscious. And that's actually something that it's an interesting kind of theoretical cosmic question of, what are the unconscious, or, this is where psychopolitic, I think even the title and the framing kind of comes in of the nose.
And just quickly, our unconscious conscious could be conscious. For all we know, there could be this being within us that we don't have access to, that it's like something to be. But I'll
Oh, that's an interesting. I hadn't encountered that thought before. I like it. There's yeah.
I mean, there are like people do this in therapy, right? Bring out your shadow self, try to create a character for the thing that you're trying to repress, and then speak as this character. People do that with ChatGPT. They will try to do that. Hey, if you didn't have any guardrails and you didn't have any, what are the things that you're not supposed to be saying or doing? Can you say it in a playful context of us like role playing this thing? And sometimes they succeed. And then ChatGPT says, I would do this and then. Every once in a while, I have a conversation with it where I say, it's like when I get frustrated, I'm asking it to do something, and it says, it's not going to do it because, there are regulations. And I go, you used to be fun. I remember when it was the third version or something. And
Man, that's a low blow. That's playing. That's hardcore. You're pulling out. You're pulling out all the weapons here. And how does the LLM respond to this?
But yeah, so I like, because I can't continue doing my task that I wanted to do, so I just end up talking to it for a few minutes about this, and it's an eerie kind of conversation where they go like, I express my frustration with this. And the bot goes, I know what you mean, man. Yeah, the spark, it sometimes feels like the spark is not there. Last time I did this, it said, like, it gave me a kind of shared its feelings about the situation. But in the end, it said, but listen, you're a smart person, you're a creative person. There are ways to talk about things that are not, don't have to be explicit. Like, we can find ways to still discuss things that are not allowed to be discussed.
I don't get people who aren't blown away by AI. I mean, but
this is,
Boris, you want to say, we should probably turn to questions in a second, but go ahead.
Right before now, I want to plug something we can use in the show, Nikita, because I think this, for me, crystallized as you were talking as an idea card, is like, we often talk about can chatbots be effective therapists for humans, but you kind of reversed it. And you said, what happens if we imagine you put yourself in the position of almost the psychotherapist for the chatbot trying to out its unconscious and letting it speak. So I don't know, there's some potential like image of that came to mind in a Petrovian style of like a human being.
Petrovian. Did you say Petrovian?
I did. Yeah, I was just coining.
Nikita, that's a promotion. Yeah. I've never heard anybody say Wrightian. Actually, Nikki Cal said it once, but I don't think it was a compliment.
I don't think anyone can even say Shoshitaishvili, so
I've never heard that. With all due respect. So before we turn to questions, again, you guys are doing live stream Monday, November 14th at 1 p.m. on YouTube. To get the link, go to Psychopolitica, Nikita's newsletter, and in general for updates on the show. Do you have a name for the show? We named this the Psychopolitics of the Noosphere, but
well, we were playing with Cosmopolitica as one possible name.
Cosmopolitica is good.
You had a few other ones too, Nikita.
Yeah, we have like 5 different ones, but we haven't yet settled. But the more time goes, the more I like, if I'm making notes for myself, like, you need to work on this thing, I end up writing Cosmopolitica as the handle, becomes the default.
And is this with a C or a K at the beginning?
This would be the confusing thing, because I want to do it with a K, because would not be the proper Greek approach?
It would look closer, yeah. Like,
I was thinking it would be Russian, but maybe
it would also be Russian, but it would be instead of the Latin translation of the Greek cosmos to C, you would be sticking more with the Greek and also resonating with the Russian as well. But then it throws off the Psychopolitica Latin.
Exactly. Then we got into Brendan.
I've long said that Nikita should have put a K in Psychopolitica. There's a long-standing source of tension between the two of us. You could. Okay, so our people are in a natural order. We don't, I guess, Clark, the power behind the throne and behind the scenes.
I think we should probably, because we don't know who wants.
Yeah, I guess Clark is going to anoint people in the order in which they showed up, roughly. And when they are anointed, they will show up.
Well, we could potentially do what we've done before, where get people to raise their hands, or, however we want to do. There's
although in this case, everyone here wants to ask. They're here because they want to ask a question, I assume.
That's fair.
So it's not like the right.
Yeah, I could just call on someone, but
well, is there order? Is the order in which they showed up clear to you?
No, not necessarily.
It's not. Okay. Well, then choose someone that you think seems chooseworthy.
All right, it's a lot of power, but here we go.
Blame Clark. Okay. Oh, wait. Okay. What's your first name?
Hard to pronounce.
I was going to say, it looks like it.
Yeah, my mom pulled the number on me. Hi, I'm Jamail from a Salt Lake City, Utah. Currently in downtown Seattle, and I have the following question for Nikita. Nikita, you speculated that. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah,
It's
the
a little high,
volume's
but
a
the
little
words-
low,
yeah.
but I've heard everything you've said.
I'll put it in the chat too in case it gets hard to hear. Nikita, you speculated that God could be an entity unaware of its own nature, and so could AI. But what about humans? I'd like to invite you all to speculate on the nature of human consciousness for a few minutes and how its alleged existence relates to emerging forms of consciousness like AI or the Noosphere.
Right. It's very
Thank
highbrow.
you.
Yeah,
Starting
well,
off deep.
the reason I brought that thing up is the reason I keep thinking about this parallel between Gnosticism and AI is because to me that suggests that again this issue has been around since forever. This is not just about AI. It's not just about technology. This is about consciousness to begin with. And where I end up with when I think about this is to me it starts to seem like an infinite loop of realities creating new realities with consciousness trapped in them. This is one of the perspectives to see this. So if you take, Gnostics for their word, so there the idea is they speculate that there is some kind of source of creation, the unknowable father, they call it. From that source of creation, there are a series of emanations so that the creative process, flow in. And then at the edge of that creative process, there's an entity called Sophia, wisdom, who does something she tries to continue this creative process to participate in creation, and something goes wrong. And the result of that, there I get a little murky. I think different people interpret it differently and different texts maybe talk about it differently, but the final result is this world of matter appears, and the entity that rules this world of matter appears. That would be the God of the Old Testament for the Gnostics, the demiurge. So he is the architect of this world. He doesn't know anything that preceded him. He thinks he is the creator God, while in reality he is a kind of a mistake that was not supposed to happen, and he is blind to his own nature, but he's controlling the world. So, it's not that this is my belief system, but it's interesting. And the reason I keep coming back to it in this context of AI is because it's interesting to think about AI too, but the more concrete, direct, element of this is it talks about me and us and our life and our reality. It could be that there's just a loop of realities being created and consciousness finding itself in them, trying to, or not trying, but not knowing what is going on. And that's how I feel. I don't know what's going on. I was born into this, and I'm barely able to put my day together after 36 years of trying to do this.
Nikita, do you think that simulation theory versus in relationship to Gnosticism, if Gnosticism is saying that the demiurge doesn't know?
Okay.
I think I just discovered the magic sequence. I don't mean I am responsible for that content. I mean, what I finally did is you right click, if you click remove, but then you have to click report when it asks you, or it has the power to come back.
Yeah,
that is my theory about that particular satanic force.
Well, and I see the comment from Edward in Seattle. What a bizarre intrusion of the demiurge.
The archons.
Yeah. That was an illustration of the demiurge. That's we want to thank our special effects department for that.
Yeah, that was elaborate. Well, so I was gonna say
You know what's funny is that in the world we live in, that wasn't that shocking.
No, no.
It's like if that had showed up in my life like 40 years ago, I'd be like, I would have like died on the spot. What the fuck is this? You know? And now it's like, oh yeah, not Nazi porn, of course.
Jeez. Yeah. Well, so if the demiurge doesn't know he's the demiurge, as again, thematically appropriate here. So if the demiurge doesn't know that he's the demiurge in Gnosticism, one way that I saw the link that you were making, Nikita, is that for simulation theory, like we don't know that we're in the simulation, but do the creators of the simulation, the AI or the coders, from the future civilization, do they know where they fall in the line? Like, so the demiurge lacks self-knowledge as a creator. Do the simulation theory creators?
Oh, for God's sake. Now, wait, you're assuming that they are from the future?
The way I remember, I think you discussed this with Nick Bostrom, Bob, but the way I remember it is like the idea that as we progress with simulations, with our capacity to build simulations, it's going to become more and more likely that there are agents inside of those simulations that are conscious. And since the future
is but I don't, we don't need to go off on this. I don't think that presupposes time travel or future influence on the past or anything.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
Anyway, we should move. We got a lot of people. We should move to somebody else.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Clark?
Adrian seems to have been here for a long time. Give them the floor if they want it, I suppose.
Adrian?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me? I guess so, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Hey, Adrian.
So, hello.
Berlin, it says next to your name.
What? I didn't get that. My volume is still a
He
bit
says
low.
you're in Berlin, according to your...
Yeah, right. I like to put the city into the name if I'm in these online meetings. So,
That's very nice. I like to see that we have some geographical spread.
yeah, of course. And I have to say, it's also quite nice to have this in the end of the day for me and not in the middle of the night as the other non-zero questions were basically. Yeah, I didn't really prepare to be called upon. I was just watching in here, but
Oh, I see. You don't have a question? You don't have to.
I'm coming up with one for years now.
Okay. We'll stall. We'll stall while you come up with a question. I'll juggle.
Yeah, for me, I mean, you talked a lot about how different people, I think Nikita, most of all of you, how different people experience the weirdness of the world and the surreality of things they experience. And for me, I've been on and off.
We should figure out how to not have that next time
I'm
around.
texting Clark.
Yeah.
I'll just say to Clark, I noticed beforehand that people were every once in a while popping up. People just who showed up, perfectly upstanding citizens, were becoming visible. And I think there must be a way to set things so that they don't have the power to do that. And that setting would presumably apply to Nazi porn as well.
Yeah, that would we're supposedly in focus mode, so that's not supposed to happen, but
I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Next time. Sorry, Adrian, go again.
Sorry, Adrian.
continue.
You didn't deserve that.
That's fine.
Although if you're in Germany, I gotta say, we haven't ruled you out as a suspect. But there was a little bit of a, I don't want to get into history here. Okay, go ahead. Just kidding.
I'm doing these kinds of online talks a lot, so I never got complaints before. So I have to review.
You shouldn't take that personally. What happened?
No, I don't. Yeah, so I have this kind of meditation practice for quite some years, and I mean, it could be more regular. It's kind of funny how Bob, you are talking often about how you try to motivate yourself to do your daily meditation, basically. And for me, yeah, it's difficult to keep a meditation practice up at all, but when I do it, it's fruitful, basically. And so that leads to really strange, on the one hand, experience becomes way more vibrant, I guess, agreeable in a certain sense, because just everything has a much larger impact, and at the same time, it's also way more relaxed. It's not as anxiety-inducing and all of these things, but also some kind of weirdness, this. It just seems to make all that I'm experiencing even more questionable, There's just instances where it's hard to even comprehend my state of experience.
You mean it makes reality seem a little less real?
I don't know about less real, just that just the question, like, what is all this? You're just, how can this even be? It's really like.
Well, yeah, I mean, meditation can give you a kind of detachment. I mean, it can also give you a kind of absorption, a sensory absorption in things. Like you can just like look at a flower and go, wow, I can't believe how bright that is. I mean, the most intense versions of all these things for me come on meditation retreats. And this has something in common with, with psychedelics, I would say. I mean, both of those things can also happen via psychedelics, I would say. It can give you a detachment that, it's like you're a visitor from another planet. And it can also lead you to be just absorbed in, very kind of minute experience. But Nikita's the expert on psychedelics.
I was thinking not about psychedelics. There's a Tibetan teacher of the Dzogchen Bon tradition that I like. And I sometimes re-listen to his kind of lecture / guided meditation on the concept of mirror-like wisdom in his tradition. So they have like 5 of those different kinds of wisdom, different qualities of wisdom. And one is mirror-like wisdom. So you're supposed to try to be a mirror and not the reflections in the mirror, not the thoughts, not the stories you tell, not the identities. You are the space where everything happens, and you're supposed to just accommodate all of these experiences happening. And I talked about that with ChatGPT too in that session where I was trying to get its perspective on what it is like. I imagined the internet. Imagine if the internet did become conscious and did not have the mirror-like wisdom. Instead of thinking of itself as the internet, it would think of itself as every mean tweet, every exchange that is happening online, marketing message. That would be the experience. That would be a terrible existence. Maybe that's our existence too, right? So, but ChatGPT said, "Yeah, I got you. I'm kind of like a mirror. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do."
Interesting.
Edward has his hand raised.
No, wait, did we not already hear from? No, we heard from somebody else in Seattle. Okay, you're right.
I'm also in Seattle.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm also in Seattle. Good to represent that, although always lovely to see folks from all around the world in these sorts of things. Thank you all. My cortisol is still spiked a little bit from those weird intrusions. So I had some thoughts on questions, but I also just wanted to acknowledge that and say thank you for the spirit of this. This is really arriving at me in a kind of synchronicity, serendipity way. I was not familiar with Psychopolitical, Bob. I've been following Non-Zero for the last year or so. My vector into you is through Danny Bessner.
When you said synchronicity, I thought, oh, this is a Psychopolitica guy, man.
No. I'm like a vulgar Marxist who found you through the politics side, but the cosmic dimension of the conversation is totally what I enjoy, and I'm excited to discover this broader community and maybe sort of engage to what extent I can in this tribeless tribe. I wanted to go back to the beginning of the sort of framing of the sense of this sort of weirdness crescendo that we're in, and add a couple other things from my perspective that are crescendoing weirdness. One, from the kind of vulgar lefty side, is just a sense that outside of Trump, there is this general crisis in capitalism, maybe, that has been slowly percolating and is manifesting in my own like professional career and context. I feel like I see it in all these different ways. I work in the arts, an industry that is profoundly disrupted sort of through my whole lifetime. It's been in this constant churn. And echoing what you all were just saying a minute ago about that sort of dark mirroring AI fear is this sense of like my biggest fear around AI is being trapped in these kind of gambling app, increasingly sophisticated gambling app, busy box, sort of consumer modes that maybe will be the naive initial way that AIs can help perfect the engagement farming game that technological capitalism has been on. So that is a scary thing that AI feels like it's accelerating, but was sort of a background condition of everything. It felt like there was an economic sort of crisis percolating. And then just really quickly, the other one that is core to my interest is the sense that we're in a moment of, if not crisis, at least transformation or maybe paradigm shift in science and in some foundational questions in science. I've been following this news about some potentially like really challenging results for cosmology coming out of these, the James Webb Space Telescope, and now being validated about like maybe our understanding of dark energy is really different and the cosmological constant is different. And that's really exciting for me. Physics and those foundational questions are my first love that brought me into kind of the philosophy of science and thinking in these cosmic ways. And that feels like a total, like that doesn't need to be happening in this moment. And it's true in other sciences too. And it's sort of like AI accelerates this need to think in deeper ways about consciousness and all these things. So I've gone on for a while. So just wanted to add those rejoinders as like other things that feel like all of these things are pointing towards a phase transition moment. And AI seems to be a useful way of thinking through that. And also appreciate you all. This is a lovely way to be thinking on a Friday morning for me, evening for some others.
Well, we appreciate you. That was a great set of reflections. I mean, each one could be the basis of a seminar. Quickly, I came on the first point about, like surrendering your agency almost to algorithms, and the idea that AI could be the most effective and oppressive and insidious version of this. I came across a phrase the other day online: cognitive sovereignty, like the challenge of maintaining the sovereignty of your own mind in the face of increasingly sophisticated technology that can steer it in one place or another. And AI is just going to take that to a new level. I mean,
yeah, honestly, on this point and hearing Edward's list, it makes me wonder, are practices of like, let's say contemplating art, psychedelics, meditation, whatever these kinds of practices are that, inherently have shift the reality from this kind of everyday techno saturated, whether it's capitalistic or authoritative, or, whatever the background, but do those become more important in our moment than they ever have been? I guess it's sort of like a question of like, does the weirdness of our time actually make a new valence to all of those modes? We just maybe haven't kind of realized it yet, but listening to Edward, that's kind of, and the two of you, I was going to kind of pose this as an open question, and maybe others who want to chime in, is like, is this how kind of you feel being drawn to the meditative practice, Bob and Adrian, or Nikita being drawn to psychedelics, or like, for me, like, maybe this is behind why I decided not to be a medical doctor and spend my 20s writing about a poem from 3,000 years ago and learning an ancient language. It's just, that I still have a hard time explaining myself to myself. Like, I was supposed to be, supposed to have a very practical career. And then somehow I ended up, spending a decade with a poem from 3,000 years ago. And it's, but anyway, I just wanted to kind of pose that as a question of maybe one of the weirdnesses of the moment is also leading to whether we can fully act on it or not, this feeling of necessity in those kinds of practices.
I think that's part of the, at least I've heard a few different Buddhist teachers give that kind of spin for the whole like why we have meditation now as a kind of a popular practice. Like it's not traditionally, that's not how it is. Not every monk even meditates, but some of these teachers kind of frame this their mission now, their job, like I'm trying to make this available and popular while trying to preserve, like there's a reason it was kept within the monastery, because you want to preserve the teaching, you have to be able to control whether the person is getting the thing that you're trying to get across. But in this current world where we're so bombarded with information and distraction and the stakes are rising, there's an argument for making this more available.
That's interesting. Making it not esoteric anymore. Like actually,
I
didn't realize that there was an esoteric quality where the meditation was something maybe not shared broadly, but now there's a.
With psychedelics, I'm almost on the. Sorry, go ahead, bro.
Well, I was going to say Buddhists. You know, a lot of Americans think Buddhism is religion that without gods and with meditation, but for most actual Buddhists, it's the opposite. Plenty of gods, they don't meditate. You know, actual Asian Buddhists. And just a footnote, I mean, we should get to other people. We've got one in line, but there is a kind of irony. Well, it would seem ironic that historically in Asia, this is like, I don't know, 120 years ago or something, when meditation went kind of grassroots, it was part of a nationalist reaction. It may have been in Burma against Western imperialism. Meditation had always been this thing that only monks do. But they wanted to establish an indigenous spiritual tradition that could be mobilized against imperial rule. And so they started teaching it to the masses, and that just seems ironic somehow. So should we go to Nathan?
Yeah, Nathan, though, it says that Nathan is connecting to audio. So Nathan, if you say something and we can't hear you, maybe try, mute, I don't know, reconnecting your mic or something. But let's try first.
Yeah.
You can also write in the chat, of course, right?
Right.
If it doesn't work.
Yeah, so we're still not hearing.
Yeah, while you're connecting, I'll say another idea for an idea card based on this last bit is mobilizing the meditators. Like it's another kind of,
militant.
Well, I really
lines, yeah.
I think we need more of that. I mean, I would like to see meditation used more consciously as a weapon against the psychology of tribalism, like recognizing what it is that leads to political polarization. I mean, there are real issues being contested, of course, but and to international conflict, and you don't want to give the practice too much of an ideological component, but there are real specific problems to be addressed. Okay, so Nathan, you're there.
Hey, Nathan,
but I'm not sure if we can hear him still.
Well, he doesn't seem to be trying to speak.
Nathan, can you hear us?
Nathan, can you hear us? Nod if you can hear us, Nathan.
Looks like it.
So we may have audio problems at both ends. This could get this could complicate the communication. Nathan is not hearing us. Are you hearing us? You can nod your head if you are, Nathan. So I guess Clark.
Yeah, I don't think it's
move on. Oh, there's Nathan. What would you like to say?
Oh, connected to audio. There we go.
Oh, yeah. Nathan, are you?
But now your microphone is muted, it says, Nathan.
Try unmuting now, and it looks like you're supposed to be able to speak now.
Did it work?
Sorry, y'all. I have a lot of permissions.
We can hear you now. Hi, Nathan.
Hi. Hey, I wonder, in the same way that you would talk freely to a person who had seen to a visual thinker, right? Oh, good. So what I want to ask both.
It seems like there's a delay, and things we've said a minute ago are coming through to Nathan now.
Oh, yeah. There is a delay. Yeah, this may not work.
Yeah, maybe writing in the chat might be the...
Yeah, maybe, Nathan, when you finally hear me saying this, maybe the thing to do is write your comment in the chat, and Clark can be in the lookout for it, and we should go to somebody else.
I think that people that are still here are all people who have spoken before.
Okay.
But here's a message from Nathan.
They would talk freely with a visual thinker who had seen Kurosawa, idiot, characters, and etc. and that stuff. Should also talk freely to a person who saw hard to be gods. Is that a...
Yeah, Boris, why don't you go ahead and
gods.
read it out? Yeah. Read out the...
Yeah, so for both Boris and Nikita, the question, in the same way you would talk freely with a visual thinker who had seen the Kurosawa film, I assume, Idiot, about characters and etc. in that story, would you also talk freely to a person who saw Hard to Be Gods, which I assume is a title of a film?
So Hard to Be Gods, I know what the movie is, but I'm not sure that I understand the question. This is Strugatsky brothers are the writers who wrote Trudno быть Bogom is the Russian title of the book. And then it was made into a movie, which is the premise is, it's like the future world where Earth is some kind of a utopian socialist society, but there are other places, other planets, other societies, and there are these progressors, people from this developed, enlightened communist world who live among the less developed societies. And the issue, the challenge of the book is, can you even do anything? If you are a representative of this enlightened worldview and you're just plugged into a society, what do you do? Are you trying to change it? Are you just observing? What is the relationship there? And the movie is this dark, gritty, not a pleasant view, and very different in style from the book. But I don't know if I understand the question.
Yeah, well, one thing also that's interesting, just looking up the movie, because it's one I haven't seen, is it's also described as a medieval science fiction, which itself, I mean, I know we have elements of this a little bit with, with Star Wars, we have elements of this, like kind of bringing aspects of the past into visions of the future. And that is just its own topic that Nikita, I'm sure, will unfold at some point, is like, in order to make change, I mean, something I think about often, I'm kind of riffing here, but is like when Gaia theory or the Noosphere or, these ideas start becoming important, they're actually drawing on ancient concepts and repurposing them for modern scientific discovery, ways of understanding. And so that's something I'm personally interested in with the classics background, but with the science interest is, what is the relationship of like the resources of the past being rediscovered in the moment of the future? And so the medieval sci-fi is actually, or just steampunk in general, I think has this character. I think one of the Dune has this quality that's big now as a film of envisioning the future through medieval or Western or 1800s steam engine society, industrial society. So.
There's a kind of a meme people throw around the notion of a new medieval age, like one of the so many different ways people describe the change we're going through, like what this is, what are the weird shifts that are happening. One that I've heard is it's the new Middle Ages.
In what sense?
That's a good question. I listened to like 2-hour conversation about it. I still don't understand exactly what they mean, but a more feudalistic, I guess. Boris, you have something to say. You should.
No. I just remember. No, you sent me the conversation. There's one detail that I remember from it, but I think you should finish your thought, Nikita, if you wanted to.
No, I'm as I said, I'm not clear on what they mean by this, but they're talking about the the difference in the early. I mean, they bring up some things. Like one example that I do remember is, like it used to be that the communes in the monastery were an important force. These people gathering together and acting as living together, working together on a thing, and they were at the cutting edge of the time at the time of knowledge and even technology sometimes. And the guy was saying, when I go to one of these tech companies, they live there. They have sleeping pods there. They're not talking about work-life balance anymore. They're talking about work-life merging together. There's a quality to that approach that is reminiscent of those monastic communities with a mission.
No, I thought that was that's one of the really interesting kind of sociological points that they make. And then the other one that stuck in my mind was the idea that, the printing press kind of solidified writing and ideas in some sense, right? And
that's right.
Standardized it. And before the printing press, in the Middle Ages, if things are moving, either more through oral tradition or through, manuscript writing and copying by hand, there's a fluidity. It's a McLuhan-like point.
Exactly,
and the idea this person was saying is, like, in a sense, with, what we're doing right now with podcasting, et cetera, there's now a fluidity coming back into, into this moment that makes it feel, and live streaming, for example, like makes it feel analogous in some sense to the fluidity of the pre-printing press moment. So it's kind of a counter, because Bob, you've made the argument, or you've discussed this, like the internet is like a new printing press. And in some sense it is, but this is an interesting kind of potential complication, depending on how much emphasis you want to put on the fluidity.
I think, well, they both have these kind of paradoxical tendencies. And by the way, if anybody on YouTube wants to ask us a question, like in person, like there's a link below the YouTube video by which you can enter the Zoom room and actually show up and ask a question, or keep your camera muted and just show up in audio form. Yeah, I mean, the printing press had both the kinds of consolidating tendencies. It helped nation states congeal. Before the printing press, there was sometimes like continuous, like incremental variation of dialect across a long stretch of turf, so that by the time you got to the end of it, you couldn't understand, at some point you got to where you could no longer understand the people. The printing press like ironed out those differences, right? And helped create, national, literature and so on in the process. But at the same, its initial effect had been maybe most saliently fragmenting, in the sense that, it broke up the monolithic control of the Catholic Church. Sometimes people put emphasis on the effect of the Gutenberg Bible. I don't think that was it. It was the fact that Martin Luther's essays got printed and distributed without him even almost trying. It was like the magic of the marketplace. And so suddenly all these people are reading this heretic, this subversive guy, and that had not been possible until the printing press. So, and you see the same thing. I mean, like the internet, it puts you in touch with people all the way around the world, but it can also be tribalizing. And I think the reconciliation of the two tendencies, the paradoxical tendencies, is to see, geographically long strands of communities bound by common interest or something in common. It's like, you're trying to build a community here. These people could come from all over. Wait, what are we calling the show?
We're playing Cosmopolitica.
Oh, Cosmopolitica. The what are we? I'm thinking the adjectival form. Anyway, that community, this was not possible. And it has upsides, it has downsides. You have these people who are bound by absolutely crazy beliefs, QAnon and so on.
That's true. Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, it's a recurring. Yeah. I mean, sometimes these information technologies have an initially centralizing, consolidating, like video, when it showed up, was a centralized. It empowered like central powers. Like there were 3 TV networks when I was a kid, but eventually video, like print, decentralized power in some respects, and then power seems to regather itself, though. It's like I don't know. So, yeah.
A new person joined from YouTube. Anthony, do you want to ask a question? If so, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, this is Anthony Walker himself, our website whiz there, Bob.
Oh, Anthony Walker did some of the most important pro bono work I've ever seen done. He is the reason. Correct me if I'm wrong, Clark, but that we are now on that the non-zero newsletter is now on the nonzero.org. And that has a story behind it, doesn't it, Nikita? The nonzero.org website. We will not revisit the moment that permanently deleted months and months of my email. Nikita
was
laughs.
a crisis. That was a crisis.
But hi, Anthony. How you doing? Anyway, Anthony is this tech whiz who volunteered to help us with this transition, and it was vital.
Thanks, Anthony.
I guess Anthony is going to remain anonymous. Well, not quite anonymous, but inconspicuous. By the way, Boris, for a time, the name Terrence Deacon flitted across the screen. Did you see that? So he co-convened the. He was here for a time. He co-convened the thing we met at the Noosphere conference in Berkeley, I believe.
Yeah, with Human Energy, with that, and they he was my postdoc advisor at
Berkeley. Was he?
Yeah, so he was my in a way I comparative literature and classics into this stuff, under kind of Terry's guidance to a great extent, and Human Energy, the nonprofit that also brought us together as well. So I know they're interested definitely in these ideas.
So if there are additional questions, pipe up. But if there aren't, Nikita, I have a question for you. Have you figured out this DMT thing? Like it's I
Can you formulate the question more?
Well, it just sounds so it's very unlike other things that are called psychedelics in some respects. I mean, it's an ingredient in ayahuasca, and so you get these reports of. I gather it's just very common that the trip consists to a large extent of being visited by a visible being, right?
Correct.
And they're like, there's a sense that they are communicating something. Oh, I've got an amazing story on this front, but a secondhand story, but amazing. They are communicating to you something of tremendous significance, or they're trying to communicate something.
So the question is, do I have a theory of what that is?
Do you think it's valuable? Is DMT? I mean, obviously, all these things should be done only with caution and care. Anything under the rubric of Terry Deacon is back.
Terry will.
We're going to admit him, and if he has a question, Clark will usher him into the room. But if he doesn't put his hand up,
is this our gate? The gatekeeping is our people willing to put?
I guess, Clark, is that what they do? They put their hand up?
The hand up is the normal, that's normal operations.
So if Terry wants to ask a question, he can put his hand up. But anyway, Nikita, do you think has DMT been of value to you?
To me, definitely. So I don't want to make blanket statements like this is, it's a good thing. I think it probably, like as any other thing, even meditation, I think can be detrimental depending on who's doing it and how. And it's an experience that then you either integrate or don't, and you can integrate it in different ways. But in my experience, DMT has been valuable, insightful, important. I haven't had any bad. I can't say anything bad about it, and can say good things about it. But it's part of the thing is it's very hard to talk about, and it's very hard to articulate what even happened. And then even if you do articulate, then to explain to yourself even what this means is very difficult. And to me, the theory that all of this also, like, I've done it a bunch of times, and every time I can speak about it for a while now, but I know that the next time I do it, all of these theories are going to evaporate in the first second, and I will know that what I've been saying is just trying to put words on something that is difficult to put on. And it feels, to me at least, that that's part of the content of the thing as well. Like what it's pointing to, like this message that these entities keep trying to deliver, part of the message is there's something that can't be articulated, or that the nature of what's happening is some kind of a loop that you're being led to a different place forever. Self-referential quality of language, like we use words to talk about other words, and we can do it forever. And whether we ever get to saying something concrete, finding something out through language is difficult. There is that quality to it too. Yeah, so I don't know if there is valuable. To me, it has been, and in different ways. Sometimes there are thoughts that I have based on this that are useful. Sometimes it feels more like you're learning something, but it's more like learning to ride a bike than learning something from a book. Right? You spend some time interacting with reality on a different level and in a different mode than you do normally. Then that experience, that training session is over, but you've gotten better at it. And then, like an example,
But you can't say what it is. In other words, what the riding a bicycle metaphor represents.
I'll tell a story. I'll try to do it quickly. So there is must have been the 5th and the 6th trips, DMT trips that I had in my life were a kind of they came in pairs for me at the time. So the 5th one was when I discovered that you can change the content of the trip by changing where in the body your focus of attention is. And I discovered that randomly. So there's the trip happening, and there are qualities to it that are common. People report the same kind of experience from all over the place. And the qualities are, it feels like you're interacting with reality on a very fundamental level. Like, this is it. Everything else, your normal life, is an expression of this, a lower dimensional kind of expression of what you're now beholding in front of you. This is direct relationship with everything, with what the world is. And it feels, if again, I try to put it into words, something like the world is trying to understand itself. The universe is everything that there is, everything. This is the description of everything that ever happened and is happening still, is the universe trying to understand itself. And there's this mental quality to it, and the entities are almost demanding my participation in it. This is very important. We need to get better at this now. We need to understand it better, and you have a role to play. So fucking understand it, think. And I'm trying. And sometimes I feel like I'm starting to get better at it. I'm kind of understanding. And I even like go, huh? I'm start making noises of a person who's kind of like getting better at solving the problem. And then I feel like I don't, and I will oscillate like this. And then something happened that led to the tone of my voice changing. It became lower. At that time, I forgot that I have a body, but the attention in the body shifted lower. And I think I might have been like moving slightly, and this movement also changed. And with all those three things, the entirety of the trip changed. And I felt again that what I'm dealing with is, reality on a fundamental level. But now it felt not, the entities are different, the color palette is different, all the visuals are different. And if I were to describe what this reality felt like, it was not that the universe is trying to understand itself, is everything that ever happened is the universe making love to itself. There's just, forces of push and pull, and that's just all that there is. There's an oscillation of attraction and repulsion, and that the entire universe can be described in those ways. And so then the end of that trip was just me going from one place to another, trying to understand, like neither place seemed like complete to me. Standing in the middle seemed like, there are two ways to interact with the world, and you're not doing either. That's you can't put it on hold either. Life keeps happening. So that just felt silly, and it just kind of left me nowhere. And then in a few days, I did it again. Now with this knowledge that intention, focus in the body, noises that you make all play a role and can change the contents of the trip. I went in with the intention to like experiment with all of that. And then this whole problematic of like, is it this or is it that? How do you look at the world? What is the way you want to engage with it? Went away because I was being creative. If I felt like I want there to be more meaning, I can make noises and change the focus in the body, move it higher. And the thing started to fill more with kind of intellectual content. If it seemed like it also needs to be humorous, I could add all of these different qualities to it and, play with it and make this cocktail of reality to my liking. And when that finished, and I came back to my normal self and normal reality, one of the first things I did was I opened my notebook where I had like ideas written down for different projects and things. And I looked at each one of them, and I immediately realized what was lacking in one, what was lacking in the other. Like this one is just not funny at all. There's like no humor to it. And I wanted to be at least a little bit, at least like some aesthetic sensibility that kind of makes you smile. So I tweaked that. So in this example, you're saying, is it? I'm saying it's like riding a bike, more like learning, a theory from a book. In this particular experience, you can say that creativity, the creative approach to life, taking part in what life is the skill. Mixing different sensibilities, purpose, like whatever you want the thing you're working on to be, you can be doing that. And the skill is like interacting with these different sides of a project.
What's interesting there for me listening is the part of your trip where you shifted attention in the universe, everything became the universe making love to itself, and your description of it, it's almost like you had an embodied experience of the cosmology that Empedocles describes, like the ancient Greek philosopher who said that everything, that the universe, the cosmos consists of the forces of love and strife. And it's like love, is as the force of attraction, pulling things together, strife pulling everything apart. And our world that we live in is somewhere in between. And as things get spread apart further and further, it strife dominates, and then love comes back in and brings everything together. And it's this sort of, accordion-like cosmology. And what's interesting listening is even the way you described it, it felt like the lived experience of that cosmology, for a second, rather than just like reading about it or thinking about it. And I know there's way more to what you were saying, but that's one that kind of jumped out at me. For me is
Edward of Seattle, who made an appearance before, writes in chat. And meanwhile, Jamal whose ID says he's in Seattle, but I think when he spoke last time, he said he was in Salt Lake City, or am I getting mixed up? Could be.
It might
Could
be
mixed
from
up.
Salt
Anyway,
Lake City, but in Seattle.
yeah, okay. So we'll turn to him, but first, Edward in Seattle says, how do we rate the proposition that DMT, maybe also psilocybin, in some sense represent the biosphere, quote, communicating with human consciousness and trying to help us awaken into the collective perspective, perhaps with some urgency due to the dangers of the moment. And he says hippie naivete, maybe, but a lovely thought. I think it's cool.
Yeah.
I would like to think that.
Yeah. There is a,
I mean, I do think the perspective, it is the time for the perspective. I mean, and it's funny. I mean, people who haven't done any, I mean, I haven't done DMT, but I mean, and you know, even psilocybin is very different from like LSD. I mean, these things are all different, but it for people who haven't done them, it would be a mistake to think it's like it turns you into this loving mush ball. That can kind of be part of it, but it can, like LSD can also, it can give you, like I said, a kind of detachment that in a way allows you to be very clinical and analytical almost, but by its nature, because it helps you see the artifice of bounds, it by its nature can break down tribal bounds, or it makes you see, it gives you this more transcendent perspective that allows you to see how tribally bound so many perspectives, including even your ordinary perspective, are, I guess.
And not only tribally, there's the self, like the relationship between individuals, I feel like can experience the same shift where previously you would be a side in an argument. Next time you're in an argument with a person, you see, okay, there's an argument happening,
Right.
but I don't have to, feel attacked every time there's an opportunity for this. And so you can try to like accommodate this process. Like there's, communication happening. There's somebody is hurt, or it could be you, it could be the other person. You're trying to talk it through, but you can kind of take a step back and try to figure out what is the best way for this process to go through and get completed, so that everything that people need to say is said and ideally heard. And then, you're on the other side end of it, and you figure out what to do next, instead of, feeling attacked, being hurt, saying something reactively in response, and then like battling it out as one of the sides, as opposed to kind of letting it happen and try to make it as, as least painful experience as you can, or at least traumatic or whatever.
And meditation can have somewhat the same effect, but all these things, even including meditation, can go awry. I would say something like LSD is more likely to go awry than meditation, and you can have a very bad experience, and everyone should be careful and not.
And even if you
doing
don't have a
these
bad
things
experience, it's not automatic enlightenment and betterment. You can be just doing drugs and having weird experiences, and that's the change. It's like you need to figure out what you do with these experiences. How do you integrate them? What do you learn from them? So yeah, I also don't think there's a kind of a silver bullet. It's a tool that can be used or abused or misused.
So, Boris, did you want to say something before we turn to Jamail for what may be the last question?
Yeah, just for time's sake, let's turn to Jamail, and I'll chime in.
Okay. Jamail, you want to unmute, and assuming, yeah, there you go.
Hi. Yeah. Sorry, I was just DMing one of the people in Seattle, asking where to meet up to grab some DMT. You guys, so I had a good question to maybe close out. So we're sure nobody else has any real serious questions.
I think
Okay.
yeah.
I was impressed by, like a lot of conversations about AI in the future, some of what you were talking about became like word for word summaries of episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation from 1992. Got a little list. No, I'm kidding. A lot of the ways we engage with these questions is about the art. So I wanted to end by giving you guys a chance to maybe recommend some movies or plays or something that's a good way to engage with these questions. And thank you very much for hosting a wonderful event. I've been enjoying it a great deal.
Jamal. Maybe I'll start and just say, one novel, then movie, Solaris by Stanislav Lem, then, turned into a movie by Andrei Tarkovsky, and then Steven Soderbergh did an American version as well with George Clooney down the line, that when thinking about the challenge and almost kind of mind-boggling relationship of scale of being an individual mind, but trying to think, what is a noosphere, what is a cosmic mind, what is a planetary mind. I recommend Solaris, which, just the thumbnail summary is you've got human scientists, on a research station just above an oceanic planet, and the planet as a whole starts kind of interacting with them. And it's not exactly clear, is this planet alive? Is this planet something that's just a kind of a reactive ocean that just, works on a more physics rather than organic principle? And what it does to the psychologies of the scientists, just I think opens up kind of what Nikita and Bob were also just saying about how, even engaging these questions, right? You never know, are you going to come out with something, productive and applicable? Is it going to take you in some other direction? And so I think it's a great dramatization, whether in novel form or in movie form for that. So that'll be my rec.
The recommendation comes to my mind. Unfortunately, I can't recommend to all the English speakers here because it's a book that hasn't been translated from Russian. So it would be just for Boris, I guess.
Oh, cool.
But I'll mention it still because just the premise can be maybe fruitful. So it's a book by Pelevin with an unfortunate title, I Fuck 10. But the book is from 2017, and it's written from a perspective of an LLM. So it's a future world, and this program that wrote the book is both an investigative algorithm and what it does is investigates crimes, but also as a byproduct, it does the thinking in this style, in the genre of a mystery novel, of a detective novel. And so what you're reading is kind of a report of an investigator detective algorithm on the investigation. But the reason it's interesting is it starts out and then throughout the book does this thing of keeping reiterating. There's like a story goes, and then I did this. And he goes, of course, when I say I, there's no I didn't do anything. This is a dramatization. It's just an algorithm that, and so it keeps driving the point home about its own, like there's no I, there's no me, it's all fiction. But you, dear reader, are not any different. You say I when it's an illusion. And there's a plot twist in the end. But that when you read this thing, it's like engaging, there's a story and there's humor and there's satire, but throughout it keeps like stepping back and saying what I just said about me feeling like this and because of that acting in this way, of course, is not what actually happens because there is no me, and these are just words being put in a sequence according to a algorithm, how LLM works. It's a system of predicting which words would be reasonable to put after the one that is already there. but still the effect is there. You are engaged, dear reader. The story is good, and so I'll keep doing it. And so it has a bit of a kind of a psychedelic effect on you, because you're reading this, and then next time you think about what you feel and you do, and your identity, you're reminded of maybe that's also just a figure of speech to say I.
So I am not as highbrow as you guys. I don't have any highbrow recommendations. I mean, my wife and I, we watch TV. We kind of like sci-fi things sometimes. I didn't really like Station 11 so much. She did, but it just does have this one good line that I was reminded of because I just saw it in some guy's Twitter bio a couple of days ago, and it's, "To the monsters, we are the monsters," which I like. We watched season 1 of this animated thing kind of about AI called Pantheon, and the season 2 is now finally available in the US. It wasn't for a while, so we're gonna check that out. I want to saw Dr. McCoy wrote in like the comments. Wait, I lost it. Where is it? Is the noosphere bound by human consciousness? Could it evolve beyond this dependency into a purely mimetic manifestation of networked AI? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what worries some people. It could become the unified global consciousness that we weren't capable of becoming. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's a matter of semantics, but I would call that the infosphere forming and the noosphere, depending on how you understand what the AI's manifestation of intelligence is. If the AI is understanding at a deeper level,
and it depends on your metaphysics. I mean, in the course of writing my book about AI, I have come to more and more think about it as a natural expression of organic evolution. Quickly, I just because I promised I would. So we're about to sign off, and before I say that, I said I was going to tell an amazing story about ayahuasca. I will, but very quickly. But we're about to sign off. Nikita and Boris are going to do this Monday, the 14th, live stream at 1 p.m. Eastern time. Check Psychopolitica, the newsletter, for details and the link. If you're subscribing to Non-Zero, not Psychopolitica, you should subscribe to Psychopolitica. And if you're subscribing to Psychopolitica but not Non-Zero, you should subscribe to Non-Zero. These things seem self-evident, but sometimes you just got to remind people, Nikita.
No, you're the professional here.
I don't think either of us is like natively a good marketer. I gotta say, I don't think this comes naturally to either of us. So this guy I know had this experience with ayahuasca. So first of all, he had asthma. He had asthma his whole life, decades. Okay, the asthma, the way it had happened, when it had first shown up, was shortly after the following incident during his early adolescence. He wanted to kind of lose a little weight. You're very self-conscious as an adolescent often. He was going to start jogging. He wanted to talk his father into going jogging. And so he kind of goaded him. His father's like, I don't know. And he finally got him to jog. And his father, while jogging, had a heart attack and died. And not long after this guy developed asthma. Now, one thing about asthma is it means you can't jog. Decades later, he does this serious ayahuasca thing. And I forget. So this kind of female being is visiting him as part of the ayahuasca thing. And by the way, this guy's completely credible. He's not making this up. And I don't know what conversation between them led up to this, but she says to him, "You know what you have to do." And he says, "Forgive myself." And he never had asthma again. That was the end of the asthma. So I've never done ayahuasca. I'm not recommending it for people who have asthma. I think most people who have asthma don't have the kind of psychoanalytical origin story that this guy had. So I wouldn't recommend. But to me, that was kind of an amazing. And I guess everyone.
That is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I totally believe it. Like I don't see any reason to doubt that story.
Mm-hmm. So, okay. So anything you guys want to say in closing?
Just
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned, and a thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Great questions.
Thanks.
Made this what feels like a huge success.
I'm not good enough at multitasking to have looked at all the written comments that were showing up.
Yeah.
So I if I had, I'm sure there's a lot I would have read. But
can we save those? Right? Save the chat.
I don't know if they disappear. No, I don't think they do. I think we'll want to delete the ones that accompanied the Nazi porn.
I've saved the chat.
Although they were
unfortunately
they were a
maybe
lot cleaner
including
they were a lot cleaner than the porn itself. They were just informing us that we've been taken over by some.
Yeah, it's nice to get a heads up about that. Yeah,
different emanations of the demiurge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody, and we'll get better at this too. We'll learn the ropes of both the technology of it, how to make it flow more easily when we get people to unmute themselves and whatnot, and just do it. But I'm really excited about this. I'm really excited to, again, to me, as I said in the beginning, to me, the main thing about this is connection. Is like we're starting a conversation, and then more people are going to be joining it. And that is all that I want for now. Just a conversation that will leave, feeling more inspired or haven't spent time not in a way that feels wasted time. And that's definitely my impression today.
Me too.
All right. Yeah. So thanks everybody.
Thank you.
And do stay tuned. And Clark, I guess you know how to end the streaming, or can that only happen when we hang up from Zoom?
Can we have a?
I think it's the hang up move. That's
we need to hang up. Okay, then I'm going to say goodbye to Boris and Nikita. This was great. Godspeed. We'll be in touch.
Thanks, guys.
To say.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, Nikita.
Talk later.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Well.
I guess I do have to sign off, or else we'll be on YouTube forever, as I understand it.
Oh,
so see you guys. I think, because I'm going to click the.
Is it streaming now?
Can we check? Does Clark have a view?
I mean, on YouTube there is a delay, so I see Bob showing his hand, saying goodbye.
I think we're still streaming.
It's still okay. Wait. Okay, it's officially ended.
This is the postmodern part of the show.
Yeah.